Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit at Work, where we dive into the real workplace stories that had people reaching for the popcorn or hiding behind their monitors. I fell for my coworker, but he was using me to get a promotion. It all started innocently enough, as these things often do. I had been working at the company for about a year when he joined the team. His name was Daniel, and from the moment he walked into the office, he had this magnetic energy that drew people to him. He was charming, confident, and had a way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. I remember the first time we spoke, it was during a team meeting, and he made a joke that had the entire room laughing. When our eyes met, he gave me a small, knowing smile, and I felt something shift inside me. At first, our interactions were casual. We'd chat in the break room, exchange a few words in the hallway, or collaborate on small projects. But there was always this undercurrent of something more, a tension that neither of us acknowledged. It wasn't until the company holiday party that things took a turn. We were both a little tipsy, and as the night wore on, we found ourselves sitting in a quiet corner, talking about everything and nothing. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear, and said, "I've been wanting to do this for a while now." And then he kissed me. That kiss was like a spark igniting a fire. From that moment on, we were inseparable. We started spending more time together, both inside and outside the office. He'd wait for me after meetings, and we'd sneak off to grab coffee or take long lunches together. It was thrilling, the kind of romance that made my heart race and my stomach flutter. I felt like I was living in a dream, and he was the perfect leading man. But looking back, there were red flags, little things that I chose to ignore because I was so caught up in the excitement. He had a way of deflecting questions about his past, always steering the conversation back to me. He was overly interested in my work, asking detailed questions about my projects and the people I worked with. At the time, I thought it was just his way of showing he cared, but now I see it for what it was, reconnaissance. The relationship was intense, and we kept it a secret from our colleagues. It added an extra layer of excitement, but it also meant we had to be careful. We'd exchange knowing glances during meetings, and I'd feel a thrill every time our hands brushed under the table. But as much as I tried to keep my professional and personal lives separate, they inevitably began to blur. I found myself thinking about him during work hours, and I'd get distracted by texts from him when I should have been focusing on my tasks. The turning point came about 6 months into our relationship. We were working on a major project together, one that had the potential to be a game changer for the company. It was high stakes, and the pressure was intense. Daniel had been acting strange for a few weeks, more distant, less affectionate. I chalked it up to stress, but deep down, I knew something was off. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, we stayed late to finish up some work. The office was quiet, and we were the only ones left. I was exhausted, but he seemed wired, almost manic. He kept pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. I asked him what was wrong, and he finally turned to me, his eyes cold and calculating. "I need you to do something for me," he said, his voice low and urgent. I was taken aback. "What are you talking about?" He explained that he had been offered a promotion, but it was contingent on the success of our project. He wanted me to take the lead on the final presentation, to make sure everything went smoothly. At first, I thought he was just being cautious, but then he dropped the bombshell. "I need you to take the fall if anything goes wrong," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. I stared at him, my mind reeling. "What are you saying?" He sighed, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "Look, if the presentation doesn't go well, I need you to take the blame. Say it was your idea, that you made a mistake. I can't afford to have this fall back on me." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. "You're asking me to risk my career for your promotion?" He shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It's just business. You'll bounce back. But this is my shot, and I can't let anything screw it up." I was speechless. The man I had fallen for, the man I thought I knew, was asking me to sacrifice myself for his gain. It was a betrayal so profound that it left me numb. I couldn't believe I had been so blind, so naive. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions, trying to focus on the project, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said, about how he had used me. The worst part was, I still loved him. Or at least, I loved the person I thought he was. The day of the presentation arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I stood in front of the room, my hands trembling as I clicked through the slides. I could feel Daniel's eyes on me, watching my every move. When it was over, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted into applause. The presentation had gone off without a hitch, but instead of feeling relieved, I felt empty. I had done what he asked, and he got his promotion. But the cost was too high. I had lost a part of myself in the process. The fallout was immediate. Daniel became distant, almost cold. He stopped texting, stopped waiting for me after meetings. It was as if I no longer existed to him. I tried to confront him, to talk about what had happened, but he brushed me off, saying he was too busy with his new role. The office gossip started soon after. People had noticed the change in our dynamic, and the rumors began to swirl. Some said we had broken up, others speculated that I had done something to upset him. The truth was far worse, but I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone. I was too ashamed, too humiliated. The experience changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. It made me question my judgment, my ability to trust others. I became more guarded, more cautious. I threw myself into my work, trying to prove to myself that I was more than just a pawn in someone else's game. Eventually, I left the company. It was too painful to stay, to see him every day, to be reminded of what had happened. I needed a fresh start, a chance to rebuild myself. Looking back, I can see the lessons in the pain. I learned that love can blind you, that it can make you ignore the warning signs. I learned that not everyone has your best interests at heart, and that sometimes, people will use you to get what they want. But most importantly, I learned that I am stronger than I thought, that I can survive even the deepest betrayals. If I could go back, I would do things differently. I would listen to my instincts, to that little voice in the back of my mind that told me something was off. I would set boundaries, both in my personal and professional life, and I would never, ever let someone else dictate my worth. To anyone considering a workplace romance, my advice is simple: be careful. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, to let your emotions cloud your judgment. But remember that the workplace is a complex, often cutthroat environment, and not everyone has your best interests at heart. Protect yourself, both personally and professionally, and if something feels off, trust your gut. It's better to walk away than to risk getting burned. As for Daniel, I don't know what happened to him after I left. I heard through the grapevine that he got another promotion, but I don't know if it's true. In the end, it doesn't matter. He's a part of my past, a chapter in my life that I've closed, but the scars he left behind are a reminder of the lessons I've learned, and the person I've become because of them. The office hookup that ended with HR manager calling us in. I had been working at the marketing firm for about a year when he joined the team. Let's call him Jake. Jake was the kind of guy who walked into a room and immediately owned it, charismatic, confident, and with a smile that could disarm even the most stoic of coworkers. He was hired as a senior project manager, and from the moment he introduced himself during the team meeting, I couldn't help but notice him. His energy was magnetic, and his laugh loud, unapologetic, and infectious seemed to echo through the office walls. At first, it was just casual banter. We'd bump into each other in the break room, exchange a few jokes, and go about our days. But then, the conversations started lasting longer. We'd linger by the coffee machine, discussing everything from work deadlines to our favorite TV shows. He had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room, like every word I said mattered. It was intoxicating. Looking back, there were red flags, little things I chose to ignore because, well, I was too caught up in the thrill of it all. For one, Jake had a reputation, not necessarily a bad one, but he was known for being a flirt. I'd heard whispers from coworkers about how he'd charmed his way through his last job, leaving a trail of broken hearts in his wake. But I brushed it off. That's just who he is, I told myself. It doesn't mean anything. Besides, I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was just having fun. The first time we kissed, it was after a team happy hour. We'd both had a few drinks, and the line between professional and personal had started to blur. He offered to walk me to my car, and as we stood there under the dim glow of the parking lot lights, he leaned in. It was electric, the kind of kiss that makes your knees weak and your mind race. From that moment on, we were inseparable. At first, we kept it a secret. There was something thrilling about sneaking around, stealing glances during meetings, and exchanging sly smiles across the office. We'd meet up after work, grabbing dinner at obscure restaurants where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. It felt like our own little world, untouched by the pressures of the office. But secrets have a way of unraveling, especially in a workplace as gossipy as ours. It started with the occasional raised eyebrow when we'd arrive at the same time in the morning or leave together at night. Then came the whispers, quiet at first, but growing louder with each passing day. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of everyone's eyes on us. The turning point came during a company retreat. It was supposed to be a fun weekend of team-building activities and bonding, but for Jake and me, it turned into a disaster. We'd been drinking again, and the lines between professionalism and personal life had completely disappeared. What started as a playful argument escalated into a full-blown shouting match in the middle of the hotel lobby. I don't even remember what we were fighting about, but I do remember the look on our coworkers' faces as they watched us unravel. It was humiliating. The next morning, we were called into HR. I'll never forget the sinking feeling in my stomach as we sat across from the HR manager, her expression a mix of disappointment and frustration. She didn't yell or scold us, but her words cut deep. "This kind of behavior is unacceptable," she said. "You're both professionals, and you need to start acting like it." The fallout was brutal. Jake and I tried to keep things professional, but the tension between us was palpable. Every interaction felt forced, every conversation laced with unspoken resentment. The office gossip reached a fever pitch, and I could feel the judgment in every sideways glance and whispered conversation. It was like living under a microscope, and I hated it. Eventually, Jake and I decided to end things. It wasn't a dramatic breakup, just a quiet acknowledgement that whatever we had wasn't worth the chaos it was causing. But even after we went our separate ways, the damage was done. Our co-workers treated us differently, and I could feel the strain in every interaction. It was like I'd lost their respect, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it back. The experience changed me. It made me more cautious, more aware of the consequences of mixing business with pleasure. I used to think that workplace romances were harmless, just a bit of fun to break up the monotony of the 9-to-5 grind. But now I know better. They're messy, complicated, and rarely worth the risk. If I could go back, I'd do things differently. I'd set boundaries from the start, kept things strictly professional, and walked away the moment I realized it was getting too serious. But hindsight is 20/20ths, and all I can do now is learn from my mistakes. My advice to anyone considering a workplace romance: don't, or at the very least, tread carefully. It's not just your heart on the line, it's your career, your reputation, and your peace of mind. And trust me, no amount of sparks or excitement is worth that kind of fallout. As for Jake, we've both moved on. He left the company a few months after our breakup, and I've since found a new job where I can start fresh. But every now and then, I'll catch a glimpse of someone who reminds me of him, and I'll feel that familiar pang of regret. It's a reminder of a time when I let my heart override my better judgment, and a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my career. So here's to learning the hard way, to picking up the pieces, and to moving on. Because sometimes, the office hookup that ends with HR calling you in is exactly the wake-up call you need. The office party hookup that ruined my reputation. It started at the annual holiday party, the kind of event that everyone looks forward to but secretly dreads. You know, the type: open bar, awkward small talk with co-workers you barely know, and that one person who always ends up dancing on a table by the end of the night. I wasn't planning on being that person. In fact, I wasn't planning on anything other than showing up, making an appearance, and leaving early. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The office was buzzing with excitement that night. The decorations were over the top, the music was loud, and the drinks were flowing freely. I had just finished a big project, and I was ready to let loose. That's when I saw him, Jake from accounting. We'd exchanged polite hellos in the break room before, but tonight, he looked different. Maybe it was the way his shirt fit just right, or the way his laugh carried across the room, but something about him caught my attention. We started talking, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was funny, charming, and surprisingly easy to talk to. Before I knew it, we were laughing over shared stories, and the hours slipped away. The party was winding down, but we weren't ready to call it a night. One drink turned into 2, then 3, and before I knew it, we were the last ones left. What happened next was a blur. A kiss in the elevator, a whispered invitation, and suddenly, we were back at his place. It was impulsive, reckless, and in the moment, it felt right. But as the sun rose the next morning, reality set in. What had I done? Jake was a coworker, and not just any coworker, he was someone I'd have to see every day. At first, we tried to keep it casual. We agreed to keep things between us, no strings attached. But the more time we spent together, the harder it became to stick to that plan. There were stolen glances in the hallway, secret texts during meetings, and the occasional late-night rendezvous. It was thrilling, but it was also exhausting. The cracks started to show when rumors began to circulate. People noticed the way we looked at each other, the way we always seemed to be in the same place at the same time. Whispers turned into gossip, and gossip turned into speculation. It didn't help that Jake had a reputation for being a bit of a flirt. I tried to brush it off, but deep down, I knew we were playing with fire. The turning point came at another office event, this time a team-building retreat. It was supposed to be a chance to bond with our colleagues, but for Jake and me, it was a disaster waiting to happen. The tension between us was palpable, and it didn't go unnoticed. During a game of truth or dare, someone asked Jake if he had feelings for someone in the room. He hesitated, and in that moment, everything changed. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks as Jake stumbled over his words. He tried to laugh it off, but the damage was done. The next day, the office was abuzz with speculation. Some people thought it was romantic, while others saw it as unprofessional. But the worst part was the way it affected my reputation. Suddenly, I wasn't just the hard-working, dedicated employee I'd worked so hard to be. I was the girl who hooked up with Jake from accounting. The whispers followed me everywhere, from the break room to the boardroom. I tried to keep my head down and focus on my work, but it was impossible to ignore the sideways glances and snide comments. The fallout was brutal. Jake and I stopped talking, and the tension between us made the office feel like a minefield. I avoided him at all costs, but it was impossible to completely cut ties. We still had to work together, and every interaction was awkward and strained. The worst part was the way it affected my career. I'd always been ambitious, but now I felt like I was constantly under a microscope. Every mistake was magnified, and every success was overshadowed by the scandal. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I'd ever be able to move past this. It took months, but eventually, the gossip died down. People moved on to the next big scandal, and I was able to start rebuilding my reputation. It wasn't easy, but I learned a lot from the experience. I learned the importance of boundaries, both personally and professionally. I learned that not every connection is worth pursuing, no matter how tempting it may seem. And most importantly, I learned that my career is too important to risk for a fleeting romance. If I could go back, I would do things differently. I would have been more cautious, more aware of the potential consequences. But I can't change the past, and in a way, I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned. To anyone considering a workplace romance, my advice is simple: think twice. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement, but the risks are real. A moment of passion can have lasting consequences, and not all love stories have happy endings. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away. As for me, I've moved on. I've rebuilt my reputation, and I've come out stronger on the other side. But I'll never forget the office party hookup that changed everything. It's a story I'll carry with me, a reminder of the highs and lows of love, and the importance of keeping my professional and personal lives separate. If you enjoy these corporate cautionary tales, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss our weekly dose of workplace drama. Drop a comment letting us know which story hits closest to home. We were office soulmates until she stole my big client. It all started with a glance. You know, the kind where your eyes meet across a crowded room, and for a split second, the world narrows down to just the two of you. Except in this case, the crowded room was the open plan office of Sterling and Grant, a high-powered marketing firm in downtown Chicago. The glance came from Clara, the new hire in the accounts department. She had this magnetic energy about her, the kind that made you feel like she was always one step ahead of everyone else. Her confidence was intoxicating, and her smile, well, her smile could light up even the most soul-crushing Monday morning. At first, it was innocent. We'd exchange pleasantries by the coffee machine, laugh at each other's jokes during team meetings, and occasionally grab lunch together with a group of coworkers. But there was always something simmering beneath the surface, something unspoken. It wasn't just me who felt it. I could tell she did too. The way she'd linger a little too long after our conversations or find excuses to stop by my desk. It was a slow burn, the kind of connection that builds over time until it's impossible to ignore. What made Clara stand out? Everything. She was sharp, ambitious, and had this uncanny ability to make everyone around her feel special. But it wasn't just her charm that drew me in, it was her drive. She was relentless in her pursuit of success, and I admired that. We were kindred spirits in that way. Both of us had clawed our way up from nothing. Both of us were determined to make a name for ourselves in an industry that didn't hand out second chances. Looking back, there were red flags, tiny ones, easy to dismiss in the glow of newfound attraction. She had a competitive streak that sometimes bordered on ruthless. I remember once, during a team brainstorming session, she shot down a colleague's idea with such precision that it left the room in stunned silence. At the time, I told myself it was just her being passionate, that she was pushing us to be better. But now, I wonder if I should have seen it for what it was, a warning. The romance itself was electric. It started with late nights at the office, the two of us working side by side on a big campaign. We'd order takeout, play our favorite playlists, and talk about everything: our dreams, our fears, our pasts. It felt like we were in our own little bubble, insulated from the pressures of the outside world. When we finally crossed the line from coworkers to something more, it was inevitable. We tried to keep it professional, of course. No public displays of affection, no obvious favoritism, but I'm sure our coworkers suspected. How could they not? The chemistry between us was palpable. For a while, it was perfect. We were partners in every sense of the word, both at work and at home. We pushed each other to be better, celebrated each other's wins, and supported each other through the inevitable setbacks. But as the months went by, the lines between our personal and professional lives began to blur. Arguments about work spilled over into our personal time, and disagreements at home started to affect our performance at the office. Still, I told myself it was worth it. We were in love, after all. What was a little drama compared to that? Then came the turning point. I'd been working on landing a major client for months, a luxury car brand that could single-handedly put Sterling and Grant on the map. It was my project, my baby. I'd spent countless hours researching, strategizing, and building a relationship with the client. Clara knew how much it meant to me. She'd been my sounding board, my cheerleader, my confidant. Or so I thought. The day of the big pitch, I walked into the conference room feeling confident. I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed every word, anticipated every question. But as I began my presentation, I noticed something strange. The client's expressions were off. They weren't reacting the way I'd expected. And then, halfway through, one of them interrupted me. "This is all very impressive," they said, "but we've already decided to go in a different direction." I was stunned. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. That's when they dropped the bombshell. "We've been working with Clara on a separate proposal," they explained. "Her vision aligns more closely with our brand." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Clara. My Clara. I looked at her, sitting across the table, and for the first time, I saw her not as my partner but as my competitor. Her face was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes: guilt, triumph. I couldn't tell. The rest of the meeting was a blur. I don't even remember how I got through it. All I knew was that the client I'd worked so hard to land was slipping through my fingers, and the person I'd trusted most in the world was the one holding them. Afterward, I confronted her. "How could you do this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal. She didn't even flinch. "This is business, Alex," she said coolly. "You of all people should understand that." Her words cut deeper than I cared to admit. Because she was right, I did understand. I understood that in the cutthroat world we'd chosen, loyalty was a luxury few could afford. But I'd never expected her to turn that ruthlessness on me. The fallout was brutal. The office gossip mill went into overdrive, and suddenly, everyone had an opinion about what had happened. Some people took my side, others hers. Our once close team became divided, and the tension was palpable. HR got involved, of course, but there was little they could do. Clara hadn't technically done anything wrong. She'd just outmaneuvered me, plain and simple. As for me, I was left picking up the pieces. The loss of the client was a huge blow to my career, and it took months to rebuild my reputation. But the emotional scars ran even deeper. I'd trusted Clara completely, and she'd shattered that trust in the most public and humiliating way possible. It changed the way I saw not just workplace romances, but relationships in general. Love and ambition, I learned, are a dangerous mix. In the end, I moved on, both personally and professionally. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove that I could succeed without her. And I did. But the experience left me with a hard-earned lesson: never mix business with pleasure. It's a cliché, I know, but clichés exist for a reason. If I could go back, would I do anything differently? Maybe. Maybe I'd have been more cautious, more guarded. Maybe I'd have seen the warning signs for what they were. But then again, maybe not. Because for all the pain and heartbreak, that relationship taught me something about myself. It showed me that I'm capable of loving deeply, trusting completely, and surviving even the worst betrayals. As for Clara, we never really spoke again. She left the company a few months later, lured away by a rival firm with a bigger paycheck. I heard through the grapevine that she's doing well, climbing the corporate ladder with the same relentless drive that once drew me to her. Part of me wishes her the best. The other part hopes she's learned the same lesson I have. So, to anyone considering a workplace romance, my advice is this: tread carefully. The heart wants what it wants, but the stakes are high, and the fallout can be devastating. Love is a risk, and in the workplace, it's a gamble that could cost you more than just your heart.